Today on the Take On Board podcast, I'm speaking with Susan Leahy about healthy board dynamics. Before we start the podcast today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record. For me, I am on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters, skies, culture, and country. And I also pay my respects to any First Nations people who may be listening today. I support Voice, Treaty and Truth for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in Australia, and I encourage others in the Take On Board community to do the same. Now, let me tell you about Susan. Susan is on the Council of the Association of Transformational Leaders and has formerly been on the boards of CNAP, I may not be saying that right, I'm not sure, the California State Association of Parliamentarians, Toastmasters, we recently had another Toastmasters board member on as well, and Associated Students Incorporated. Susan is a dynamic and highly engaging speaker, trainer and facilitator, specialising in board development, leadership and effective meetings. As the founder of Robert's Rules Made Simple, established in 2004, Susan has empowered thousands of board members, board chairs, and support staff to master Robert's Rules of Order, transforming meetings into productive, efficient, and empowering experiences. I'm sure we'll hear more about that and how Robert's Rules of Order can be a fun and interesting and engaging tool to use. A sought-after expert in communication, leadership, and group decision-making, Susan has worked with organisations of all sizes, from not-for-profits to Fortune 500 companies and government entities. She's the creator of the acclaimed Chair a Meeting with Confidence program, designed to help board chairs lead with clarity, authority, and ease. Welcome to the Take On Board podcast, Susan.
Oh, I am excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So good to have you. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. However, as always, before we do that, I want to dig a little bit deeper about you. Can you tell me a story about young Susan that tells us a little about how you got to where you are today?
So I love that you are asking this question. The young me loves to talk about this story because when I was about 14 and a half, my mother got elected to serve in our local city council. And I remember my mom was the only female on an all-male board. And dare I say, it was a highly toxic and dysfunctional board. It was a very difficult 5 years for my mom, but she stuck in there. And when she first joined the board, I remember watching one of the meetings and it was really chaotic. They used this thing called Robert's Rules of Order. And I could tell my mom didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. So it was a very bizarre, but wonderful and life-changing mother-daughter bonding experience. We enrolled in the local junior college and I took my first class. And that's when I became captivated with this man named Robert and all of his rules. And I didn't realize that Roberts would become really the cornerstone of the work that I do in the world. And, you know, for me, that work, I think it really cemented because I'm not saying that that board gave my mother cancer. But I am saying that when she left that board, it sure didn't help her diagnosis. Whoa. And the toxicity that I watched my mother endure over those 5 years had a real impact on me. And so I think about how this reverberates out to the work that we're doing on boards, our desire to do good work, but how many times there's a misunderstanding in the process and there's also a dysfunction on the board. And if we can heal that and really teach the process, then all of a sudden it can be life-changing.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So as you no doubt know, and I know, folks out there in listener land definitely know, I ask this question a lot. And often there are lessons in there about, being involved in things and so on, but never have I heard quite such a direct, at 14 and a half, my mother and I dove into Robert's Rules of Order.
Yes. Super direct. And you know what's so crazy is that from that first class, Roberts followed me throughout my entire high school career. I competed in Roberts Rules competitions through an organization called FFA. I was the student body president of my high school, and then went on to my college. And I literally got elected to be the Associated Student Body President way back when, many moons ago, because I could run a great meeting. And it was literally because I learned about the fundamentals of Robert's Rules of Order, because you don't need to become a parliamentarian to use Robert's Rules of Order. Yeah. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is that a lot of times parliamentarians, they don't have the gateway on this. This is a reference guide. And great teachers make it accessible. And that's what I'm up to doing, is providing a roadmap so that people understand how to use Robert's Rules of Order in a way that really fosters a more healthy and productive dynamic.
Amazing. Okay. Well, look, you've provided the perfect segue then. I am still slightly blown away. I was on my school council. I was on various things, and didn't delve into Robert's Rules of Order as a 14-and-a-half-year-old. Perhaps I should have. But anyway, that is amazing. So, all right. So like I say, you've provided us with a beautiful segue about healthy board dynamics. Tell me more. Well, where should we start this conversation about maybe the connection between Robert's Rules of Order and healthy board dynamics? Where should we begin?
So let's start with an equation, right? I always do this with all my boards. So we're going to start with an equation. Time equals what? Right? So this is an equation that I ask all of my board chairs, my board members, my executive directors, everyone I work with. Time equals what? And inevitably, the answer that I hear is time equals money. Time equals money, Susan. Come on. We got to get things done. But what I want to invite them to add to the equation, because that's not wrong, but I think it's not the 100% right answer. I think there's a better answer, is that time equals life. Right? Time equals life. And when we can start looking at our meetings at that perspective, was this meeting a good use of our life? Then all of a sudden we're going to have a different type of motivation in shifting and trying on different things to see if we could be more productive, more streamlined, more healthy. Right? So I would say that that's really where it starts, is, do we really care about the life of the people in the room? And are we really caring about the lives of the people that we're impacting through the decisions that we're making in the boardroom?
Right. I'm already now hooking back to the story you told us a moment ago about your mum and her toxic environment. And then, if I'm hearing rightly, her cancer diagnosis after that period. And perhaps the stress of that period, I don't know, being an input, if that's the right word, or being a factor in that diagnosis. Our environment has an impact on our health, for sure. And it's not just, getting a terminal disease, but it's that sense of, and I know that not everybody can see this in the podcast, but if you can visualize my thumb up real quickly, right? Thumbs up. It's this simple for me. I want people to walk out of their meetings feeling like that. Thumbs up. Right? But if the thumb is down and the energy is down and the feeling is down and we're feeling depleted, then there's an opportunity for training. We have to start thinking about that, caring about the energy of our meetings, the context of our meetings, so that we could start making some small shifts. Because what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we do that in our meetings all the time. Yes. Yeah, interesting. I love that equation. It's interesting when you said time equals what. In my head, I was thinking time equals, the words that came to me were actually about effectiveness and value and so on. So it was interesting. Money didn't occur to me until you said most people say time is money. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the saying, isn't it? But but what you said is great. It's that it's effectiveness, it's productivity. But I think we need to take it even more personal. And very rarely do I ever have someone come back and say time equals life. And I think when we're starting to operate as leaders at that level, then all of a sudden, the way we're interacting with each other, the way we're debating, the way we're discussing, the way we're really learning the fundamentals of Roberts, it all has a different meaning. And so I want to bring a little life back into your meetings. Well, I was just, again, we are in tune. I think I was, because, people think about Robert's Rules of Order. You've just shown it on the screen there for those that are listening. It is quite the tome. It's not just a light read that you can pick up and, absorb in an afternoon. Yeah. It is quite the tome. It's called Robert's Rules of Order. I think it's fair to say it's probably not attracting most 14-and-a-half-year-olds when it's compared to other young adult fiction.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that to life?
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that I bizarrely do very well. I can take very dry topics and I can glean like all the little bits of information that are important and create a viable roadmap. You do not need to become a parliamentarian to use parliamentary procedure. And so what I think is so important is giving people a palatable roadmap that they can follow and actually execute in a timely manner. And that's why I created robertsrulesmadesimple.com, because I do believe that Roberts can be simple. The majority of this book, and I'll say the book is part of the problem, because the majority of the book is not needed for day-to-day use. However, where we stumble is that boards don't understand the fundamentals of the language. Right. Yes. So if we don't even understand the fundamentals and we're trying to understand, it's like you're trying to go to chapter 45 when you don't understand chapters 1, 2, 3. And so what I've created is a roadmap that includes what I call the 7 fundamental motions. And if we can make sure that every single board member on our board commits to learning at least these 7 fundamental motions, then it's going to help us be more effective related to the business of our board, because Robert's Rules of Order is used to help us handle the business of our board. That's it.
So can you take us through the seven foundations?
I can. Before I take you through the 7 fundamental motions, I'm going to give you Susan's 3 laws. Okay.
Okay. Then do that.
Robert has his very male perspective, but I want to hold the context. That's what we as women do. We do that really well. We hold space, right? I mean, really just kind of even take it to the fact that I had a baby inside my womb. It was holding space, right? For something to come through. That's what we do well. So before I'm going to give you his rules, which he wants to insert into the meeting, I want to hold the space and say that number 1, we have to have a law that everyone on the board commits to learn the basics, because this is where we get tripped up. Is Stan has been on the board for 1 year. Melinda's been on boards for 20 years. And so how do we match up to make sure that Bill and Melinda actually know the same thing, right? So we've got to make sure everybody understands the fundamentals. So that's the 7 fundamental motions. I want everyone to commit that, yes, we're going to collectively learn that. It's not good that one person, it's everyone on the board. The second rule is that we need to look at Roberts as a team building tool. That means we are not going to use Robert's Rules of Order as a weapon or as a manipulative technique. Okay. And so this is so important, because that happens a lot on boards. And so we need to make sure that becomes a rule. And law number 3, this ties back to time equals life, is that we are all going to commit that meetings should not be a waste of time. So everybody gets on board that, yes, we're going to operate in this context. And now I will introduce you to the 7 fundamental motions.
I love it. I'm loving the framing and the context. It's beautiful.
That's right. We're holding the space. That's our strength. The feminine energy in a boardroom is so important, and many times it's lacking. So we need to have the masculine and the feminine, which I embody. I embody it, and you need to embody it, and a man needs to embody it, a woman needs to embody it. People need to embody both the masculine and the feminine in the boardroom. And so the Robert's Rules roadmap starts with what I call the 7 fundamental motions. Now, when I say motion, just think question. A motion is nothing more than a question. And Robert says that in order to start any business discussion, you have to start with a main motion, a main question. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. What happens if you get a bunch of people in the room and you invite them to talk? Will they talk?
Generally, there is, depending on how you do it, there is silence first. And then, as I say, depending on how you do it, they might talk. See, I'm a facilitator, so I immediately think of ways to get people to talk. And often those ways are not used in the boardroom.
No. Yeah, they're not used in the boardroom. And so it's important to think about, because I love that you brought up the word facilitation. So let me kind of put it in this framework. When people say, well, we use Robert's Rules of Order to run our meetings, I'm like, that's only half true. You use Robert's Rules of Order to handle the business of your meetings.
Yes.
Okay, the other side of your meetings are information items. Information items do not require Robert's Rules of Order. They require a higher level of facilitation skills.
Yes.
So you facilitate your way through information, and then you move your way through Robert's Rules of Order, the business. And you do that by making a main motion. Before you can talk about something, you have to focus the discussion. So we use a main motion.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start with that main motion, and then I go through, and I'll just go through them very quickly. The amendment, which is to change, add something to, subtract something from. The amendment to the amendment, which adds something to or subtracts something from the amendment. We have refer to a committee, means you take that motion, you give it to the committee. Postpone to a definite or certain time, means you want to postpone before you vote and you bring that motion back at a certain time. I talk about a motion called lay on the table. And my favorite one is previous question, right? So based on what I just said, motion equals question, question equals motion. So previous question means previous motion. So it says, hey, you guys, do you want to stop talking and vote on the previous motion? So it's a way to keep people moving forward so that we're actually voting. Because when you're making motions, you're just asking a question. You're not getting anything done until you start voting.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, hang on.
I just gave you a whole lot. I threw that map up all over you.
I know. And in fact, I was trying, you may have seen, I've been jotting down. I've been trying to pretend I'm not jotting down, but I am jotting down as we go. So first up, I just need to check 7
fundamental motions.
And so I just start with the main question.
Main motion, yep.
Main motion, sorry, main motion. Start with the main motion. Then there's the number 2 is amendment or change. 3, refer to a committee.
3 is amend the amendment. So there's 2. You can go even further. You can make another little change. So main motion, amend the amendment, refer to a committee.
Right. There you go. I was missing one. That was the one I was
missing.
There it was.
You're like, which one's not there?
Exactly. So I now know what's missing. Great. Ooh, okay. So, and I love the start of it, start with the main motion.
Yes.
It's, and I even think about the way board papers are structured and so on. And it would be lovely, I think, to see in that paper up front, what is the main motion here?
Yeah. What is the main motion?
And not necessarily, I don't see that as, approve the recommendation, although it might be. Yep. The recommendation is X, Y, Z. We approve, we discuss, whatever. Actually, let's start there. What is a good, from what you've seen, whether it's in papers or in the meeting, what is a good main motion?
Well, I think it really depends on the capacity of your board. Some boards are newer boards, and so having that main motion written out would be a great way to help the board members understand the rhythm. Let me just give you, I'm an auditory learner, so I'm going to just kind of share an exercise. And I know those of you who are listening in, some of you aren't seeing this, but this is what, to me, when I think about a meeting, there's a flow to a meeting. And when we're dealing with information items, so if I'm a chair and I say the next item of business is information item X, we're going to have a presentation for 10 minutes, and then we're going to have any clarifying questions, right? So information should sound like this. Come on, let's go. Keep it moving. Come on. That's good. Right. But what happens sometimes with information is that people start debating. Well, I agree with that. I disagree, but you don't get to agree or disagree with information. It's just information. You don't get to debate information. You don't get to give a story about information. It's just information. So we need to ask our board members to understand that information items require clarification questions. Can you clarify that? I don't quite understand that. Could you repeat what you just said? What's the date of that again? All these items just to clarify information. And that should go like this. Come on, keep it moving. Let's go. when you get into the business of your meeting, so the next item of business in the agenda is business item X, the chair will say, is there a motion? And the moment the chair invites the motion, because what Robert says is the question needs to be on the floor and it needs to be seconded before any discussion occurs. So what we're saying is that we then enter the rhythm of Roberts. And for me, the rhythm of Roberts is reliable. It's that beat that we're searching for, that rhythm that builds trust and consistency. So the motion is made, the second is made, the chair repeats, asks for discussion, discussion is had, a vote is taken. Oh, I love it. Like, that's what I want my meetings to feel like.
Interesting. Okay. I'm loving that auditory learning as well around the quick. And I even loved back in that first part about it for information, clarifying questions.
Yes.
They are clarifying questions. I love that. Okay. And then we slow it down for the business of the meeting.
Slow it down because the language is fast enough.
Right? Yes. Actually, total side note here, but in your view, like my immediate inclination would be to start with the business, start slow and then do the quick stuff at the end. Have you got a view about that?
Well, it really depends on how your organization structures the meeting. I mean, usually we start with business because it's the approving the minutes from the last meeting. And then we might have some reports. If there's no business that's in the reports, one of the things, again, I love that you're an expert facilitator because that's the piece that I think that sometimes the chairs lack. They lack guidance on when to be a facilitator and when to be somebody who's really engaging in the business. So when you're just facilitating your way through information items, you can go ahead and impose deadline or time frames. We're going to give you 3 minutes, you get 2 minutes. But when you start handling business, you can't do that. It's a different motion. You have to start, using different motions. But again, thinking about this, and that's why I always say, ask yourself as you look at each item on the agenda, is this an information item? Is this a business item? And, my chair meeting with confidence online training is such a powerful tool to help focus chairs thinking. I take people inside my brain. You want to know what I'm thinking about when I make an intervention? I think about these 3 things. You want to know what I think about when I walk into a meeting? I've got these 2 buckets. I'm very visual and I want to make it simple. And the roadmap has 7 steps and it's housed within this beautiful pyramid. And so it's very visual. It's very simple so that when you're in front of people, it's easy to access.
Yes. I love a good framework. Yeah, it does help guide. Okay. Oh, gosh. I don't know where to go next. Susan, help me out. Where should we go next?
Oh, well, let's go back to the context and talk about how do we set the board chair up for success? Because there's 2 things that are happening. There's the content of your meeting, which is what you're going to get done, but there's this other piece that we don't talk enough about, and that is the context. So how do you support your board chair to deal with the very delicate people side, energy side of meetings? And so one of the tips that I share, I call it the high five context. Woohoo, high five, right? So everybody loves what a high five feels like. But what I want you to do is define that high five. So as your board chair, I want to let all of you know that it's my intention that everyone in this meeting feels heard, seen, valued, safe, and respected. So you pick your 5 words. I don't care what words they are, but if you define your context at the beginning of your meeting, you have a better chance of living into your context in the meeting.
Yes. Well, and most organizations have a set of values as part of their strategy. I would say those values should be a live thing for the organization and indeed a live thing for boards. So that might be a nice place to start.
Yes. I love that. Please mine those qualities so they're in alignment with the vision and the mission of the organization. And doing it and what I call it, I have a tool, it's called bookending. So the chair starts with the high five context and ends with the high five context. I want to thank everybody for their participation today. Again, all of us working together created an environment where everyone felt seen, heard, valued, safe, and respected. And again, whatever your 5 words are, you're nicely holding the context. And the next big secret is that once you've defined the context, you now have a powerful tool to make an intervention. So let's
Absolutely.
say someone's talking out of turn. How do you handle that? How do you handle if someone's making a personal attack? You say, George, I want to remind you that this is an environment where people are going to feel seen and heard. So please keep all comments directly through the chair and wait to be recognized.
Yeah.
So instead of calling George out and telling him he's a horrible person, redirect him towards what the positive intent is.
Yeah.
And now it's a really generous way to not only hold the context, but lead within the context.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Oh,
high five.
High five, exactly. Let's do oh my gosh, Susan, I knew this would happen, right? I said at the start, the time is going to fly by. It always does. But somehow I could tell from our off-air conversation prior that it would particularly happen here. So from the conversation that we've had, what are the key things you want people to take away?
I really want people to hear that it is essential in order to up-level your board meetings and to have a healthier dynamic. You do not assume everyone understands your decision-making process. And in this case, it's Robert's Rules of Order. You make sure that everybody goes through the same training, that everybody is speaking the same language. It will exponentially increase your board's effectiveness. And I want people to remember that their life is worth it and that the lives of the people sitting around the table is worth it. And if you walk out of the meeting and you're not feeling good, you have a training opportunity. And I encourage you to take advantage of that. Don't keep doing the same thing you've always done and expecting a different result.
Yes, exactly. That metaphoric, I'm hitting my head against my hand, folks, or the metaphoric wall for those that are listening. Okay. And can I check in on that? Everybody needs to be involved. That says to me, this needs to be a regular process. It's not a set and forget. Oh, we did that back in, 2014. It's done now. It's like, we've got a whole new set of board members or even just one new board member. Therefore, we need to go through the process again. How does that remain live for boards?
So, I love that you're bringing this up because this is something we didn't talk about. But in the pandemic, I actually created for my clients, I really want to partner with my clients to help them educate on board and influence future leadership. And so we create training portals for organizations who have large number of boards that need to be trained. For example, I'm working with the Lieutenant Governor's Office in the state of Montana. I work with about 160 of their boards and councils, and we have a one-stop kind of portal that's customized just for them to have their board members come in and receive training. This is specifically about Robert's Rules of Order, chairing with confidence. And then what's great about the portal is that we put the client's information in the portal as well. So that's probably the hardest thing is if you have new people joining the board, how do you keep educating them? The portal is a great way to do that. I also offer something called board licenses. So people can buy a license of my Roberts for up to X number of seats. So you give them to these 7 people, but then these 2 new people join, there's seats available for them. So you're just making sure everybody has at least the same level of Roberts training.
Excellent. Okay. Now that probably at least in part answers my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a resource that you would like to share with the Take On Board community?
Yes. Beyond bringing me in to do webinars or training, my online trainings are dynamic. I really cater to a variety of learning styles. I'm not a big reader. That's why Robert's Rules of Order as a book was, I got through it, but I had to do it while I was on a stair climb or Stairmaster, through short videos, through really interesting PDFs and direct and specific information that is very well produced, dare I say. It really helps up-level everyone's understanding of the fundamentals. So robertsrulesmadesimple.com.
And dare I say it, Robert's Rules made simple and perhaps a little more exciting and interesting than you might otherwise expect from the long book. Oh, Susan, thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing some of your wisdom on this. I have no doubt it certainly sparked a few things in me to think about, and I'm sure it will be the same for the Take On Board community today. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
It was an amazing use of life. So thank you so much.
Thank you.